I guess we'll find out. Okay, so we are going to go through the report card process. So if you didn't already, the report card procedural checklist. So I'm going to go through this. I have Post-it notes and notes all in mine. So I'm going to be reading this. This is my first time going through this training. So some of you have sat in with Sherry. So I am definitely going to go at a slower pace than she did, as Rebecca and I are also learning it. Rebecca is here for those of you that are in the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to type those in the chat. Rebecca will be answering those. Or if you guys ask a question and I don't know the answer to it, she'll be helping me to find an answer for that. So we kind of work together that way. So if you don't, so we're going to be going through three, the report card procedural checklist, the GPA, and yes, I have more Post-it notes and notes on this one, the GPA procedural checklist, and the honor roll procedural checklist. So for those of you that are new, if you did not find this information, when they talk about things like the procedural checklist inside of the learning garden, that's a daycare. If you go to the learning center, the procedural checklists are listed separately than everything else. So if I go into my student information and then I go to procedural checklist, they are all going to be spelled out here. So you have the management, the student is typically where we work. And then there are some down in the EMIS area where your EMIS coordinators might grab some of that information. But these kind of have tasks and steps that you work through versus just typing in and say, you know, how do I put in GPA, which I will show you a few things that I'm going to have you guys get. We'll just search for those where it just kind of gives you a step-by-step and say, okay, this is how you do it, where the procedural checklist gives you kind of all that background information. Okay, so we are going to start. Again, if you are looking at your screen, I still don't know all of my navigation icons yet, so I am still keeping this open. So it does scrunch my screen a little bit because I did try to make my screen a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see it with that sharing. So if you guys can't see via Zoom, let me know and I will try to increase it a little bit more. Okay, so we are going to start with the report card procedural checklist. So there's different things before, and it is report card season, before processing report cards that you should look at. And a lot of these things are already set. So it's not something that you have to set every single year. It's just something you want to double check, make sure that it's set the way you want and so forth. Some of you are new to the district, so you might just want to know where this information is located when they're talking about things. So the first one is verifying how your district is calculating your marks. So that is in your student information options. So if I go into my management and school administration and student information options. Some of these you'll see I'll use the go-to, some of them I actually navigate to. So it just depends. So if you want to use your go-to, you can type in options and you'll find your student information options. I'm going to go to my high school level. So you can, does anybody have multiple buildings that you switch between? Some of you might have like middle school and high school, but I would pick one primary building to work with today. So your student information options is a place where we don't come very often, usually at the beginning of the year, because this is where schedules are finalized. So if you work with scheduling, you might have been here to look or to finalize that schedule. But when we look at our marks, there's only one thing to select here, whether it's going to be alpha or numeric. So I know Loudonville is on the call and Ashland West Holmes Career Center. You guys are numeric districts. The rest of us are alpha. So they calculate by percentages where we calculate by the letters. So again, this is set when we do SYI or school year initialization. Not sure if you're going to be part of that process, but you'll hear me say SYI quite a bit today. During that SYI process, this will carry over. Next is looking at our courses. So I'm going to type in courses in my go-to menu, and I'm going to go to courses. So when you're looking at your courses are already set. So they roll over from year to year, unless you need to create a new one. But when you're looking at some of your courses, there's things that you want to look at. Well, first, is your course active? So you can see here, my course is active. If I need to edit this, or if I'm creating a new one, when you're generating or creating that new course, what is it going to look like? So we have our course code and our course abbreviation. And then of course the course name. The course name is what the teacher sees in the gradebook. So this is the important part. Okay. So in this case, the teacher would see English 9 and then whatever section that you would schedule them to. So if they were section then when they edit, they will actually see the course code. Okay, but a teacher doesn't really care about the course code, and half the time they rename it to whatever period they're teaching, but just know that the course name is what populates in the teacher's gradebook. And when it populates in the teacher's gradebook, it populates alphabetically. So your number of hours of instruction and then priority scheduling. So a couple things down here that you want to look at. First, majority of us are high school and or middle school. So is it college, high school credit? So if it is high school credit, you want that checked. So some of our middle school students take high school credit classes, such as our algebra, things like that. So if they are getting high school credit at the middle school, we want to make sure that is checked. Of course, we want this to roll over year after year. Is it display on parent access? There's also another screen. Gradebook kind of controls parent access. This really does not, but most people just have it checked anyways. Okay, but the setting itself is in Gradebook. Of course, is it active? You want it active. So if it accidentally gets unchecked, it will be inactive, but it could be restored. Making it inactive doesn't officially delete it. It just makes it hidden. Is in the update history. And then these you want to look, is it dual credit? So are they getting high school credit and are they getting college credit for it? So in this case, this is going to be a CCP class. So they are getting college credit. So it's dual credit. And then the NCAA core course, if that's checked, that applies to the NCAA rules, which I am not 100% sure on all those rules yet. So still getting there. But what we want to look at are marks. So also on the marks are a few things here where it easily gets overlooked, especially for the GPA. So our level of difficulty. If nothing is selected here, it's not a weighted class. So it just goes on the normal grading scale that StudentInformation has. If there is a level of difficulty, and we'll talk about setting those, this is where it might be a 5-point scale, it might be a 4.5-point scale, and so forth. GPA add-on level, no one was using that until this current school year. But this is where instead of giving it a 4-point scale, if the student gets an A in the class, they get an extra 0.25 GPA. So it's similar to the level of difficulty, but it's just automatically adding it. So they can't get a 4.1, they would get a 4.25 if they got an A in the class. The credit units. Okay, so double check that because that's going to also, especially if you're prorating your GPA, that's going to determine how much is going towards it. Here is the important one. Is this included in the GPA? So if this is not checked, such as a study hall, such as our case management classes, some districts have coaches classes, things like that. Those are not included in GPA, but our core classes, our specials classes, things like that, those are all included in our GPA. So is it in the honor roll? Should be included in the honor roll? Should it include the total credits? And then should it print on the report card? There is one in here, include in the permanent record. That would be for Katie because she's at the elementary school. If you ever decide to do permanent record labels, this would show on there. So typically elementary does permanent record labels where middle school, high school would do more of GPAs, things like that. And then if it was an honors course, you would select it here. Okay, so just kind of looking through, making sure this is a big one. I don't know why, but looking at this, the grade level selected, when I see issues with courses, sometimes this is blank and I don't understand how it's blank because it's a required field, but make sure the appropriate grade levels are selected for the course. So if it is in there, okay? But again, I've seen it multiple times. I don't know how it gets saved, but just always double check to make sure the grade levels are selected. And then again, also another thing to check is the course type. Make sure that it's a class. So a lunch should be scheduled as a lunch, a study hall should be scheduled as a study hall. Your CCP classes would be CCP. But make sure if it's a normal class, whatever, that it's scheduled properly. You don't want it scheduled as a lunch if it is actual instructional time. Okay, next is looking at a student. So if we're looking at the student profile, so we looked here at our course and it has include in GPA. If we look at an individual student, and I just had a ticket on this the other day, there were 4 students at the high school level. For some reason, they were not getting GPAs because they were unchecked. So if we look here at Mickey's going to be my prime example today. So we're going to look at Mickey Mouse. I'm going to look at his profile. So on the additional tab, so if I look at the additional tab, all the way at the bottom, there's include in GPA. So that's the important one. Like I said, I'm not sure exactly how they figured it out, but there were 4 kids that were not included in the GPA. Same thing with the honor roll and the ranking. So if you're going to produce an honor roll list, maybe you have honor roll merit roll or straight A's honor roll, you want to make sure they're included in that as well as the ranking. And if your student requires a paper copy, I know some districts are going without paper copies now. They're just letting them be digital. Some parents might require a paper copy, so you can check that if you need that, and that is located here. But what I do want to show you, and this is how I determined if the student did not have that include in GPA checked. Okay, so I went through Easy Query. So I'm going to show you that process because you don't want to have to go through every kid and be like, oh my gosh, what if I'm missing 4? I want to make sure I have everybody. So I created an Easy Query. I went to reports and I did my SIS student search. Okay, so Easy Query, reports, SIS student search. Now I happened to save it because I ran through it multiple times in multiple buildings. So I didn't want to have to keep selecting everything. So I'm going to apply because you can save or create your new student search. I did not do anything on the first tab, the filter criteria. I just left that blank. I went to my field selections. So I wanted the student's first name and last name printed. I wanted their student ID because sometimes working with students, it's easier for student IDs. We prefer student IDs in help desk because a lot of things we are required to put the student ID versus a student's name. Then in enrollment, I selected two things. I did the building grade and I did include in GPA. And that was it. So just what I wanted printed, their name and ID, and then their grade and include in GPA. Then on the summary tab, it's going to show me everything that I did. And if you are thinking you're going to do this again, you can come down and you can say create and you can save it yourself. And sometimes depending on the size of your screen, you might not see that little button at the bottom. So just make sure you scroll down all the way so you can see it. But I want this as a CSV file because then I can filter it. That's what I like about this. I can filter it out. I'm going to download it. Sure. So this is, I didn't do anything on the filter criteria. So in the filter selection, I did first name, last name, and student number. There's multiple other things you can pick. So if you wanted to look at homerooms, things like that, you could. I just did these. Yep. And then the enrollment, I had those two. So I'm going to download this. It's going to populate my Excel file. So the district that I was working with, I ran this for every building to make sure that there was nobody else missing. And we don't know how they were missing because in previous years they had it checked. So we don't know what changed over the year. So I'm going to turn on my filter. So I'm going to click on the little filter and say filter. And then I can click on my nose, say okay, and it would populate any nose. So I have these two students that on their student profile, so on that additional tab of the student profile, the include in GPA is not checked. Okay. And like I said, you know, we don't know how they got unchecked. We don't know if it was during enrollment or the one student was new. We don't know if that was during enrollment, but the one student had it last year and then this year didn't. So we don't know if it was a final forms thing. We don't know how that happened, but this was a way to check it to make sure everybody was included in GPA. Any questions with that? Okay, the next checkbox is the verify mark types. We do that for you. So if there is anything that changes from year to year, you would put in a support ticket to us and we would get that updated. So your mark types would be like your grading periods, if you use exam periods, if you are using averages, things like that. So we take care of that for you. And that carries up every year during SYI. Same with verifying your marks, but we're going to look at this. So in my go-to, I'm going to look at the marks. All of task 1 of the GPA procedural checklist talks about marks and verifying everything in your marks. So a couple things that we're going to look at. 1, these are school year specific. Okay, so I know we've had some districts that have changed their grading scales, things like that. Please note, everybody on here is listening to me. Please note, if you make changes to your grading scale here in student information, it does not update GradeBook. We've had 2 different districts that were working with 2 different grading scales. The GradeBook grading scale was different than this grading scale. So it causes issues with grades. So if there is updates to this screen, it also needs to be updated in GradeBook.
for the other topic we just finished. Doesn't matter for students who attend else. Prior, probably still part of the verified student profile.
Yes, I don't think so because, well, I'm not for sure. Do you include them in your GPA ranking? I wouldn't think so because they're attending the different school. So I don't think it would matter. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it would matter for somebody. Like if I was attending, Worcester City, but Green is my district of residence, Green doesn't need to worry about me being included in the GPA.
Sorry to interrupt.
Nope, that's okay. Nope, perfect. So a few things. So instead of talking about this later during our the GPA procedural checklist, we're just going to kind of look through them. So our marks, please be careful when you're looking at these because sometimes they are not in order depending on what column is filtered. So you might see A plus, A minus versus A plus, A minus. So just be cautious. Okay, so you can see here it's B minus, B plus. So just be aware of that if you are entering numeric values in here. Okay. The EMIS grade column is newer. I think it was last year. It was last year's update. So this is the letter grade that gets reported to EMIS. Every mark has to have an equivalent EMIS grade. The point value. Okay, so that's if our alpha schools, a letter grade does have a point value. So if they have 2 A's, right, it would calculate to whatever it would be based on using that point value. If you are a numeric school, you must have the minimum and maximum numeric marks without any gaps. So you'll notice here, I go out 2 decimal places, 96.49, no gap going to my A with a 96.5. Okay, so there can't be any gaps in there. The credit multiplier, this is the same for everybody. It should be set at 1. So that is one thing to always look at. Make sure those are set at 1. Is credit earned? So most of those should be checked, except if they are not getting credit for the class because they failed or they're incomplete or have withdrawn. So those should be checked. And then this column, since we're talking about GPA today, that one's important. So if it is going to be included in the GPA, we want to make sure that those are checked, including our fail, because our fail is calculated as a 0 or whatever percentage it might be into the GPA. Okay, and again, just remember if things get modified for the 25-26 school year, the grading scale needs to be updated in GradeBook as well. Okay, the marks group, we're going to skip over that one. We are next going to talk about our difficulty levels. Many of our schools use the difficulty level. So we're going to focus on that where I said the add-on levels. I only have one district using that, so we're not going to focus as much time on that one. So you can type in difficulty in the go-to box, or you can follow the breadcrumb trail there on the checklist. But if I'm looking at this, so the first one that we are going to look at is our course difficulty maintenance. So this is where we are just going to name our difficulty levels. So some districts might have 1, they have weighted and that's it. Or they might have CCP and that's it. Some break it down. Some have this one, and this is our test district. Some, we call it weighted. Some call it honors. You might have it called something else where they have it broken down between AP classes, CCP classes, and weighted classes. Those might be 3 completely different grading scales. So this might be a 5-point scale. This might be a 4.5 scale. and this might be a 4.25 scale. Okay. So this is, again, this is just where you're naming it. So if you needed to add one, it would open up to this screen. You would give it a code. You would name it. If you want to add a class, a description in there, you could, and then make sure it's active. If you're no longer offering AP classes, you can of course make it inactive. Okay. So that's a simple one. So now if we go back to difficulty, and the reason why I'm typing in difficulty, you'll see there's two different ones. So we just looked at the course difficulty maintenance. This is in our scheduling where our difficulty point scale is in our marks. Because now this is we're gonna go in to say, hey, what is an A worth in our CCP scale? So that's why it just breaks down the two, but they're in two completely different areas. So I'm going to go to my difficulty point scale. And then you can see here the level of difficulty. That's the code that I gave it in the maintenance screen. Okay, so my A was my AP, my weighted, and then my CCP. So the code. So you can see here my A's. So I have 3 A's, one for each of my difficulty scales. So my weighted and my CCP are 5 point, and then my AP are a 4.5 scale. So we're just going to look at our AP. You would, if you're creating these, you would say add point value, and then you would open up to the screen. So which of your levels of difficulty would you include? Okay, so in this case, we're doing our CCP. Now, what is the point value? So my A is a 5 point, my B is a 4 point, and then are you going down any further than that? What mark you're going to use? You do have to do this. If you use pluses and minuses, you have to go through all of them. Okay, so it can be cumbersome setting it up, but they should have carried over from last year. Okay. And then I don't think anybody's using the combined mark groups, so that would just stay blank. And then, like I said, you would go through each of the letter grades. So A minus, B plus, B minus, and so forth. So then in this case, I was gonna say, I think one of them does not go to B minus. Yeah, it's my AP. My AP class does not go to B minus, so it only affects the A's or the B. So as soon as it hits that threshold, so in this case, my AP class, I get a minus, I'm gonna get a 4.25. But if I get a B plus, I'm gonna get whatever is on the original grading scale. So if my B plus is a 3.3, that's what I'm gonna get. No difficulty points get added to my grade. Okay, any questions with that? I know those are a little bit confusing. And then I'm just gonna jump back real quick. If I go into my courses, if I look at my course under my marks, this is where I would pick my level of difficulty. So if this is my weighted class, so then it's going to look at my ABC grades based on that level of difficulty. Okay, next, I'll just briefly talk about the GPA add-on level. Oops. Might help if I type it correctly. So when you have your add-on levels, you'll see here, you give it a name, what the grade is, and then how many extra points they get. And they can vary. So if I get an A, I get an extra. Notice it's like 0.05. Okay. You know, if they get a C, it might be a little bit different. It might be 0.025. But you would create them here, just like you did the level of difficulty. You would say, whatever you named it, what mark it would be, and then how many points it would be. Okay. And then same thing in your course, you would add whatever the name was, and then it would apply those points to whatever the mark is that the student gets. Like I said, I only know one district that is using this, so I'm not going to focus a lot of time on that. The next one is called Verify Exception Credit. I cannot think of a reason why this is used. If somebody has an idea of why this is used, I will definitely go through it, but I don't really know why you would do this. My only thought is if there was like Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 and somebody moved in from Spain and they already speak Spanish and you're excluding them from Spanish 1. But I'm not for sure. So that one we're going to skip over. If I get a concrete example, I will definitely mark that in my notes. The next one is our reporting terms. Okay, this one is important, super important. So our reporting terms maintenance. Okay, and you can see if I type in terms, I have several things, but we want our reporting terms maintenance. These carry over during SYI. So the only thing every year during SYI is the start date and end dates need to be set for each of the grading periods. Okay, so there are two parts to your reporting terms. You have your standard reporting terms, which are your actual reporting periods, and everybody calls them something different. In this case, I'm calling them GP1 and GP2, etc. You might call them RP for reporting period or QTR for quarter 1. But those are the actual physical periods that the students are attending. So they must have dates. And you'll see that I have 4 of them in here. The other ones are what are called virtual reporting terms. Okay, so they don't need dates. So your interim, so it's part of GP1. My exam is part of GP2, so it's a virtual term, so it does not need to have dates. If at any time you're like, oh, well, we're no longer doing first semester exams, we're only doing finals at the end of the year, we need to know that with a support ticket, because then we need to update the marking patterns to make sure that everything is correct and calculating correctly. So you can also see as you're going through this, you cannot remove your reporting terms. So those are set when SYI is created. You can edit the dates. So if something happened in the start of school is changed, I think that changes in the calendar wizard, but. And then any of your virtual terms would go under it. So even though interim 1 actually comes before the end of the 9 weeks, interim 1 is part of grading period 1, so it goes below it. So that's probably the biggest thing, is these are out of order. Okay. Any questions with those? And again, if next year you guys decide you're not doing an exam or you're not doing exams at all, let us know, put in a support ticket, and we'll update your marking patterns. Okay, next is the fun part. We're going into the next procedural checklist. So we are going to switch over to the GPA procedural checklist. Okay. Most of this is just a verify, because these do copy up with SYI. So if nothing has changed, you're not going to have to do anything here. Okay. But some of you are new. Some of you, there's multiple new people in your building. So you might want to start a new pattern. You don't have to do what somebody else has done prior to you. So, so we're going to look at a few things. first, before we get into the procedural checklist, inside of student information, so my first one, so if I just go to student information, my first area has documents and learning videos. So we already looked at our procedural checklist, but if I look in my 9 articles, there's one called instructional videos. There's a short, like 2.5-minute video on creating GPA sets. Okay, so if you forget what I said today, because I'm going over 3 hours of information, you can come back here and you can look at this video. And you'll see once we get through this, it's super simple. So like I said, our first task, so on page 3, our first task, most of this we already went through. Okay, so we already talked about making sure that it's included in GPA on our marks type. Our credit multiplier needed to be at 1. No, I want to look at just marks. Okay, so our multiplier need to be at 1. We need to include it in GPA. If I have a numeric building, in the GPA per course. Okay, so that's all of task 1. We're done. Now we're going to look at task number 2. So task number 2, we're going to go to our GPA set. So I'm just going to, in my go-to, I'm going to type in GPA set, and it will populate my GPA maintenance. Sorry, I forgot a note. Okay, so I already have them set. So it is best to set them up for 9 weeks. Okay, so we have one for every 9 weeks. And then you can see here, and this is typical for a lot of districts, I have one that's my cumulative score, and I have one that's a weighted cumulative score. Okay, so sometimes some universities, some things like that want an unweighted score. So you would use this one. My awards, so think about your seniors. They're not finished with the 4th 9 weeks, but you're doing awards and things like that. So you might need to create one that doesn't include the 4th 9 weeks grade. So it would just be for the seniors with the earned credit. So we'll look at the settings in here. So if you needed to create a new one, I would click on Add GPA Set, and it would populate this screen. So there are 3 tabs. Our first tab that we're going to look at is the General tab. This is where you give it the name. So my code is GP1, and my GPA set name, what I'm going to see when I'm running report cards, things like that, is the GPA set name. So I will see this. The mark credit type, that is your current school year. They call this one previous school year. I don't know why they don't just call this current school year. But for this current school year, the mark credit type would be a progress 1. Progress 1 is always a grading period. Okay. Don't think of these as grading period 1, 2, 3, and 4. It does not work that way. So grading periods are always progress 1, and your semester averages are always progress 2. I haven't learned enough to know what progress 3 does, and I know I've heard that progress 4 is never used. And then earned is your final grade. So grading period, averages, final grade. Okay. If we're doing the current GPA for our current 9 weeks, we of course don't want to include anything from our previous years. Okay, we don't want last year's GPA included in this. We just want to see where we are at for this 9 weeks. We are going to include the grade levels. So I know we've had some new buildings, we've had some shifting around with the moving different grade levels with the buildings and so forth. So make sure the appropriate buildings are set here. So in this case, I have 9, 10, 11, and 12. It is tricky. Make sure the checkbox is before the number. Then what reporting term is this GPA set for? So I want it set for grading period 1. What type of mark type is it going to be? It's going to be a grading period. Grading period always goes with progress 1. If this is a cumulative, I'm going to use a final and it should be with earned. And we'll look at those here in a few minutes. If this needs to be applied to an ad hoc membership, you could apply that to that. So maybe you're doing the GPA ranking for, or the GPA set for the JVS kids. I don't know. I don't know why you would use a separate ad hoc membership for certain kids. I would think if you're doing a GPA set, you would do it for everybody in a grade level. Okay.
You have your ad hoc membership the whole grade level.
It could be, but you would just pick the grade level.
Good point.
So next would be my calculations. I think everybody is on standard, including our numeric districts. I know it says alpha, but it does your standard calculation for GPA. I don't know what all of these mean. They are in the appendix of the GPA procedural checklist. That is a majority of it. So when you looked and saw that it was 53 pages, you probably panicked. But appendix, I think it's appendix D through, I think G, are explaining what each of them are. I am not going through all of them because we all use the standard GPA calculation. So the precision, this is how many decimal places you're going out. So if you're looking at the GPA, so I'm calculating out to the 3rd decimal place. So that's how picky or precise you are going to be to make sure there are no ties. Missing marks, typically we use ignore mark. So if there is a missing, you don't want to include it in the GPA, it just skips over it and it doesn't affect it. If you say ignore the student, it ignores the actual student. So this, for example, if the student is missing any marks in a current reporting period, then they will not get a GPA at all. So that's why you don't want to include ignore student. And then use 0. So maybe a teacher forgot to put their grades in. So, you know, I'm a math teacher. I forgot to put my grades in. So if I run the GPA set, I don't know that you forgot. If I say use 0, it calculates it as a 0 in their GPA. So it will drop everybody down for that teacher that forgot to put those marks in. So again, typically we use the ignore mark. If the GPA is going to use that difficulty level, yes, they call it difficulty points here. It's the same thing. Include other schools. That would be your choice. And then the add-on points, which only one school is using that. Prorated credit. So this is typically checked because first 9 weeks, they don't have a full credit yet. If they're taking, you know, a year's worth of Algebra 1, they're only getting a quarter credit all the way to the end when they get the full credit. This hopefully will be removed soon. That was put in there for, I guess, COVID-ish year. And then ignore dropped sections. There was something I wanted to say about this one. Where's my dropped section? Okay, nope, it's not. It's on the next screen. So that would be if I drop this midway through the year. So I started taking Algebra 1. I took it first 9 weeks, but during second 9 weeks, I dropped it because it was too hard. If I check that, it will ignore that in the GPA, but they took it first 9 weeks, so it should be included in the GPA. So it's on this screen, I believe. Oh, it is on that screen. Hold on. Hmm. I'm not sure why. That is not, there should. I'm not missing anything, am I? I have a note, but I can't find it, so sorry. And my note is refer to Appendix I because it goes into more clarification, which is the last page of this, but I'm not getting those choices. Yeah. I don't know why I'm not getting them. I did earlier. Yeah, I'm still in the high school. See, I don't know how to troubleshoot issues like this yet. Oh, Becky's got her hand raised. Do you have an answer for me? Did I miss something? She might be typing. Or is that only for cumulative? This is just my, I do. See, she says, I don't have an answer, wrong, but, oh, I had it earlier. It must be cumulative, unearned, okay. Cause I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. I might be lacking sleep, but I'm not crazy. So the prorated credit, so, let me go back to where we were. Hold on. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna go back to my first 9 weeks. Okay. So you're prorated, how I understand it. And of course, let's see, does it have a good explanation in here? Prorate is explained further in the appendix. From what I understand, is if you check prorated. So if a student has a full year class, so, my algebra class is worth 1 credit. So I'm looking at, since this is a 9 weeks class, it is looking at a quarter of that, calculating the GPA versus using the whole credit. That's how I understand it. I think, hold on, let me see. It might be. I know there's an appendix for this. Thank you. Let's take a second to look at that. And the screenshots are so big, I'm sure everybody can see exactly what those are showing. The handout is pretty small. Okay, so so I'm reading the FYI. So for instance, if a trimester school has a ratio of 1 to 3, it would use 1/3 of the credit value, so 0.33, times the value of the mark to figure out the GPA. So in a quarter or a yearly class, it would, on quarters, it would be 0.25 calculated towards the GPA. Does that make more sense? Okay,
Yeah, she-
perfect.
they gave you 20 pages of appendix.
Exactly. Yes, so mark Appendix E. I'm going to highlight that one real quick. Okay. So now looking at, so I think we figured out that the use manual course history is with our cumulative average. So what these two are, and I don't have them up on my screen, but you can see it from the screenshot. The manual course history mark credit detail is the amount of credit that they earned from a manually entered course. Whereas the course history course credit saying, hey, Algebra 1 is worth 1 credit, but you only took it for a semester. So you're only giving it, you only got half a credit, but it would still look, because the course was worth 1, it would still look at that 1 credit. That's the bottom one. It's looking at the course itself, where the top one looks at the mark to see, hey, if I got a B in the class and it was manually entered, I'm earning that 1 credit. So it's based on what was actually earned by the student. So I think most of the time it is the top one that is used. So hopefully, Lauren, that helped you a little too. Okay. And then let's go to our rank. Everybody's going to use the GPA because we're calculating it with the GPA. If I use inactive students, it would obviously bring in those inactive students. Ties, how do you want those ties? So if 2 kids get a 4.0, are they both ranked number 1? Or do you want to count them each separately? And then one would be 1, one would be 2, and so forth. So I think typically most of us use the count all the kids the same, because we have that precision of how many decimal places we're going out. So a majority of the time, the more places you go out, the less chances there are for ties. There are some cases, but then they would just tie for 5th place. Okay. And then you would save if you made any modifications and so forth. So I'm going to cancel because I'm not going to make any changes to that. But it is suggested that you have one for every 9 weeks. Because if you're making modifications to any of the marks, things like that, even before you run report cards, you should refresh so it knows, hey, let's recalculate everything, make sure that it is running correctly. Okay. So we'll look at our cumulative GPA. So this is the earned. So if I click on my edit, so this is, they put it for cum, so it's on the 4-point scale. So this is the unweighted one. So you will see my mark type, or my current school year, is earned. So this is the final grade. If it is a semester final for a semester class and or a all year class with the final, it would be earned. This is not a quarter. It's not for first 9 weeks. So you can see then my previous year, I also want that because this is my cumulative GPA. So what I got in 9th grade, 10th grade, and so forth. What grade levels? Hopefully they're the same. And then my reporting terms. Notice I'm going by the finals. So, and it looks at each of the courses. So if it is a semester class, it'll grab the final for that versus an all year class. Okay. And then you'll see here, same thing, we would go through the same exact thing and check everything as needed and then save. If I look at my weighted GPA, okay, so everything's the same on the first screen. I am still going by my earned. Okay, but this one I am using my difficulty points. Okay, so I now have my difficulty points checked. So that is going to my weighted scales, my 5-point scale and or my AP scale. Okay, so my previous one did not have that. So if I look at my regular 4-point scale, this is not checked. So it just looks at the typical, it looks at your mark screen and looks at that grading scale. That's it.
Has a 23 grade level that's checked.
Those would be your special ed kids. I'm not sure that they would actually get a GPA. I mean, because they could be a 5th-year senior. Can you make a note of that, Rebecca? I'll look into it. Yeah, I'm not sure that they would be included. But maybe they are. I'm not 100% sure. So we'll have to look at that and get back to you. So this one, for awards. So a lot of times, like I said, this could be for awards at the end of the year, because the year is not completed yet. So we don't have our fourth 9 weeks in there. So if you look here, I mean, you could run the GPA for the GPA set for third 9 weeks, but in this case, and actually this is wrong. Most of the time, if you're doing something like this, especially if it's for seniors, you would include the earned as well. So in previous years, you would have earned, but current year, you would have my grading periods, and I would have periods 1, 2, and 3, the grading periods, but previous years would be earned. So if I'm a 10th grader, it would have my cum from last year, first through third grading periods this year. Or for example, my seniors, it would have my cum from 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. And then it would have all the way up to the end of third 9 weeks. But we don't have an earned grade yet for the current school year. I wish they would put current year in here. We don't have an earned grade yet because the school year is not over. And then same thing, if you needed the difficulty points and so forth, if any of that was on there. I hate that you have to go all the way through to be able to cancel out. Okay. I am going to give you guys a couple minutes just to double check yours. So look through them. Like Lauren, you noticed that 23 was selected. Again, I know a lot of you are newer or new into your building. So see what is there, see what was created by the person that was there before you. Because if you don't make any modifications to this, this will carry over to next year. So if you don't like how it looks or what it's named, name it what you like. So next year it'll be the same. So give you guys a few minutes to make sure you have those, and then we will go to task number 3. I actually just needed a drink. Yeah, for the end, especially senior awards.
I don't have any
Yeah. Lauren, that's what we were just talking about, in the room too, is what district are you? You're, what, Wayndale, yeah. That, I was gonna, like it wasn't coming to my mind. So I'm like, what's it called? And you said Southeast and I said Wayndale. So we were talking about that also in the room. It's just one that we put in our test site. You don't have to have it. If it's Sherry said she was highlighting stuff and so forth at the end of the school year for awards. So this is something that'll do the calculations for you. So again, it completely is up to you. It's just a suggestion, so you can see kind of how it works. Okay. I'm going to move on. So task number 3 is refreshing your GPA set. Just have 4 grading periods shown. Well, Georgia, you're the career center. So do you guys do a cumulative GPA or the homeschool does that? My guess is the homeschool probably does that because they're included in their ranking. So I think you're okay. So when you are running reports, and we'll look at the report card and so forth, but when you're running reports, like the R700, which is your report card screen, there is an option to refresh the GPA set. It is suggested to never run it from within a report because it takes so much longer. So if you know you're going to run report cards and you want to make sure everything is calculated and it's fresh, just click on the refresh here and it's going to refresh your GPA set. And then you will see, you'll see the last time that it was recalculated. So, as you're going through, you might do this 2 or 3 times before you run report cards. If teachers are making changes to grades and so forth, you want to make sure that it is accurate. So that's really all you have to do is just refresh it from here. Now, next is actually looking to make sure the students received the GPA that you have just created or that you're applying to them. So if I go into my GPA and rank, okay, so far I do not have a student in context. So this is I'm just going to look at a whole to spot check a few kids. So I'm going to go to my student GPA and rank. Now I can pick what grade level. Oops. So I'm going to do my 12th graders and I'm just looking at the GPA set for first 9 weeks. Remember, the GPA set name is what you see, not the code. So you want to make sure that that's something that you understand. So once I click on that and I say view, it's going to pull up all of my whopping 3 kids. You guys will have more, but it's going to show my rank, their GPA, and so forth, if there's any add-on points and all of that information. If I want to look at an individual student, I can click on the little magnifying glass to view Mickey's details. So when I look at Mickey, then I can see, okay, his GPA set was calculated for first 9 weeks. It did include difficulty points. It is not including the previous year. And it is based on progress 1, which is GP grading period 1.
That's no student showing what could have happened in their selection.
Teachers haven't, if you're in the 24-25 school year, teachers haven't submitted their grades yet. So this goes based on report card grades, not what's currently in their grade book. I'm talking to my screen like if I get closer, If you guys saw my camera, I'm like talking to the screen like you're right there. Don't know why. So next is my calculations here. So throughout, as we're getting into report card season, we're finishing up our 9 weeks. Okay. So there is a chance. So if we look here, this last time the GPA was recalculated was at 10:03. This configuration is based at 10:05. If there have been multiple changes in the teacher's grade book and they're updating their report card grades and so forth, these two GPAs can get off. So what would we have to do in order to be able to recalculate these? We'd have to go back to our GPA set and hit that refresh button. So that's the first thing that you would want to do if you see a mismatch between these two GPAs. Okay, so go back to your GPA set. So that's task number 3, hit that little refresh, and then it should clear that up. So if I look at the details, this is what it's looking at. So all of my classes, what terms it was, they are included in the GPA, what the students' marks were. They're all progress 1 because it's grading period, and then what their point value was. And then this is these two. This is the that prorated that we were talking about. So they attempted a quarter of the credit. It's a full year course, so it's 1 credit. They attempted 0.25 and they earned 0.25. So that's how the GPA is calculated. So, and then this one's a half a year, so it breaks that one down. So that's what the prorated does. If you uncheck the prorated, I don't remember which way it goes. If you uncheck the prorated, then it would say 1. Those would all be 1s. So that's looking at the details of a student coming from the course history. Now I can also look at the student and see, okay, well, how many times has the GPA been ran for the student? He's a senior. I need to know where his GPA is he fluctuating? Is he going up and down? What's going on with my student here? So notice this is going from student information to SIS. So that is, I don't have to have a student in context. Okay, it's looking at everybody. So if I close out of that, this is how I get back to my GPA set to see everybody listed. If I want to look at an individual student, I would go to my SIS and go to student. And then from here, course history. And then GPA. So now, oops, and I took him out of context. Go back to Mickey. You can see here, right now, he's ranked number 1. Last year, during GP1, he was ranked number 2. And you can see what his GPA was at that time and when it was last calculated. This is important for the cumulative GPA sets. So you can see where they were at the end of each of the school years. Okay. But then you can see how his ranking has varied and gone through. I thought I was nice and gave him mostly A's and a few B's. Sherry was nice last year and really gave him good grades. Okay, but again, that is by going to SIS and then to student and then course history. If I just go to SIS and then course history, that's going to show me the whole list of all the students. Any questions with the GPA set? So Appendix A and Appendix B are kind of just troubleshooting some of the issues that you might have. We talked about some of them. For example, on the student's profile, make sure that include in GPA is checked. On the course, make sure include in GPA is checked. So you want to make sure a few of those things. Appendix B is looking at why is there a wrong GPA. So this might be the GPA uses progress 2 for the grading period versus progress 1. Or maybe somebody thought it was, progress 1, 2, 3 meant grading period 1, 2, 3. So quarter 3 has progress 3 checked. Okay, so those are some of the troubleshooting issues for the GPA not showing or showing incorrectly. And again, a lot of times you can find these things on the marks screen. That's where the why can't I think of it? All of them have to be 1. The credit. Yeah. Let me go to that screen. I know what I'm talking about. Multiplier. Why couldn't I think of that word? The credit multiplier always needs to be at 1. They include in GPA. So again, most of these things are already checked. They're already in place. So you don't have to worry about redoing them. However, if there's multiple people working, sometimes things get unchecked mysteriously. So you just need to double check those. And then of course there are all the different appendix in here. If you want to look through those and see what some of the different grading styles are versus the standard calculation that we use, you feel free to look through those. The other appendix that I wanted to point out is Appendix H. So this is some of your course settings. So if you're looking at this, it will say, hey, if you mark this in a high school course, this is what the outcome is going to be. And then your second page of that, or depending if you're front and back, your second page is, hey, we're at the middle school. This is a middle school course and it's marked for high school credit. What's going to happen? Okay, so to me, I thought that one was an important one. And then Appendix I, we already talked about but that's the prorated, yes. Oh, maybe it's if it's unchecked, those boxes come up. I thought it was cumulative. Yeah. The first one's checked, yeah. Yeah, and then you can see it explains it down, kind of like how I explained it at the bottom. If they only got half credit for it, it's going to give them half credit, where the course credit is whether they earned all or half, they're getting all of it. So, any questions with GPAs? Okay, I am going to stop there for a quick break. If you guys want to get up and stretch, if we could be back at 10:20 for those of you that are on Zoom. For those of you in here, I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, our next section. So if you were looking at the procedural checklist for the report cards, it just says to look at the honor roll procedural checklist. I don't know why they don't just put it all together as a free-flowing document, but the next one is our honor roll procedural checklist. So this will apply to anybody, all grade levels, if you're running honor or merit roll. The only thing, and I don't remember, Katie, if Chippewa has overall grades and at what levels for the elementary. I know K never does, but I don't know if 1 and 2 do. So if they do, this will apply to you. So the honor roll procedural checklist, again, this is similar to the GPA sets that you're just kind of checking it because this will carry over year to year. So it copies with SYI. It is not a requirement. It is just a suggestion that you have an honor roll set for each of your 9 weeks. so that when you come back through to run your honor roll for second 9 weeks, that you don't accidentally make a mistake. So if they're set ahead of time, they're double checked, and then you can use them year after year since they carry over. Looking at it, I have no clue what this first page means yet. As I'm learning things, I will figure this out. I'm sure it has something to do with how it's set up. I'm just not sure, but it is in there. I'm sure it's one of the settings, but I just don't understand it yet. So our task one is configuring our honor roll. So I just typed in honor roll in the go-to, and that brings me up with 2 areas. I have my honor roll maintenance, and I have my honor roll report. Okay, and again, you'll notice they're kind of in a little bit different areas. So that's why I like using the go-to, because they're both right there for me. So my honor roll maintenance, that's where we're going to start off. This is where we are going to be creating. So looking at this, everybody might be a little bit different. And again, set it up the way you want if you are new to the building so that it works for you. And then it will carry over during SYI. And for those of you that are new, SYI usually takes place between January and February. So that's when we'll roll everything to the new school year, the 25-26 school year, and you'll be able to start modifying some of these things. But if your district might only have honor roll, merit roll, and not per 9 weeks, you might want to separate them out and have one for each 9 weeks. So then it carries over during SYI. So we're just going to look at some of these. You can see I have all A's for all 4 quarters. I have honor roll for all 4 quarters, and I have merit roll for all 4 quarters. I am going to tell you, working with this has been set up in the system and it has carried over for SYI. I'm going to correct this because to me, this is backwards. The honor roll is 3.0 and higher, and merit roll is 3.5 and higher. That's opposite. So I need to get them renamed and so forth. So when things calm down, I will get that taken care of before SYI so it carries over. But same thing for you. If something is not named right or whatever, you want to make sure that you get that named correctly. So if you needed to add a new one, you would click on add honor roll. No matter if it is all A's, no matter if it's going to be your merit roll, they call everything in here honor roll. Okay. Once you click on the add honor roll, it's going to bring up your screen where you're going to give it the code and then the name that you want. Again, this name is the important one. This is what you are going to see in the R700 report when you're creating report cards. It's going to ask what honor roll set you are going to use. So make sure you have worded it somehow that you know. And then it's going to be a GPA. So typically we have that GPA on there. I don't know of anybody that has anything different. The minimum number of courses, this is going to vary per district. So how many courses is the honor roll based off of? In this case, I only have 1. Some districts might have 3 or 4. Some can have all the way up to 5. At the high school, to participate in sports, you're required to have 5 credits. So you might say, hey, my honor roll is based on 5 courses. And then the minimum number of marks. So same thing. How many marks? So they might have 5 courses, but they don't have marks for all of them. What is the minimum GPA? So this is my all A's. Am I allowing A minuses or am I not allowing A minuses? In this case, it's going to be all A's, so they cannot get below a 4.0. What GPA set is being used? So here are all my GPA sets. And since this is for first 9 weeks, I'm going to pick first 9 weeks. Precedence. Okay, so this is important. So your precedence is based on the importance of the honor roll. Okay, so in this case, we have 3 different honor rolls. We have our all A's, we have honor roll, we have merit roll. So this is the order that I want it to look at in the system. So for example, all A's. Okay, I know if I have all A's that I'm also on the honor roll and the merit roll, but I don't need them to show up on those lists as well. So having the highest precedence, having a 1, it's going to only put them on this report. So then when it looks at the next one at merit roll or honor roll, if I put that as a 2, then it's going to say, okay, if I'm not on the all A's, do I meet the qualifications for honor roll? And then my merit roll, I would put as a 3 and say, okay, if I'm not on all A's and I'm not on the all or the honor roll, then I would show up on the merit roll. Okay, so that's what the precedent means. You might have 1, 2, maybe 3, depending on how many honor rolls you have for your district. Okay. And then here is where you put anything that you want on the report card. So in this case, it says you've made the all A's list. Again, this has to be something, if it's triggered based on qualifying for it, it will show up on the report card. Okay, so you don't want to necessarily have it. If you don't have a 9-week specific, you don't want to have it say, hey, congratulations on the first 9 weeks, and you're printing second 9 weeks and you forgot to update the honor message. Okay. So that's setting it up. So then once I would hit save, it would save this. I can also go to my exclude marks right from here if I want to. But if I saved, I can also click on the exclude marks from here. So it takes you to the same place. So if I look at my exclude marks, so this is task 2. I'll say, okay, hey, I want to exclude A minuses. Okay, so you would put in what letter grade it would be. We don't have mark groups. And then how many you're allowed. Why they have include and exclude, I'm not really sure. But they even put in the paperwork that include and exclude do the same thing. So not only do they document it, they haven't. So if I say include 0, it means the same thing. Don't ask me. So anyways, so I'm excluding it. I'm not allowing any A minuses. I'm not allowing any B's, B minuses. This has to be broken down by each individual grade. So B, B plus, B minus, C, C plus, C minus, and so forth. So make sure you're getting all of them. If you don't use pluses and minuses, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, just put your other letter grades. And then each one that you would add, you would just say add mark. Now on the call, I know we have 2 numeric districts. So yours would be based on numbers. So notice that I can't click on numeric rule because we're not set up as a numeric district. So it doesn't even allow me to click on that tab. But when you're setting up numeric, you want to make sure you're going out 2 decimal places. So you get a more precise response or results. Okay. When you are done adding all of the marks, then you would hit cancel. I know it's weird. You would think I don't know, you just hit cancel and it takes you back to the honor roll maintenance screen. Okay. So the reason why we suggest setting up 1 for each 9 weeks, if you just have one set up for all A's, honor roll, merit roll, if I come back in here for second 9 weeks, I have to go back into the all A's list. I would have to modify this, make sure I have an appropriate name, change the GPA set, make sure that my message is fine, resave it. Then the third 9 weeks, I would have to do the same thing. And year after year, I have to do that. Whereas if you have a list of all your honor rolls by quarter, I can just come in here, go to my little pencil. I can see that it's all set up for third 9 weeks. I don't have to worry about modifying anything. And you can also provide custom messages if you want, if you have it set up per quarter. Okay. So now we'll look at merit roll, which to me should be called honor roll. So if we look at this, this is going to be set up a little different because you can see that my GPA required is only a 3.5. So if I'm looking at the first 9 weeks, so here is where I put in my minimum GPA. So it's going to be my 3.5. It's going to be my precedence 2 because my all A's is my 1. And then I'm going to look at my marks to exclude. So you can see here, they're allowed A's, they're allowed B's, but they're only allowed 1 C, C minus, or C plus. Okay. After that, they're excluded. So that's kind of how it looks. Question on that. Yeah, I was going to say that one's not complete because you should have the D, D minus, D, and F as well, because those should not be allowed in those grades. So this one's set up correctly. So you can see they're allowed up to 2 C's and then no D's and no F's.
Pretty easy honor roll compared to that merit roll.
This, I was going to say, this should, I need to switch them.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, once those are all set, you have them listed, then you can use them throughout. So as you're doing your R700, it will be available to you. You'll pick which 9 weeks and what you want pulled in there. So again, it just makes it nice and easy if you have them all. Do you have to? No, it's just a suggestion. And then you can see over here all the messages that were included. So once you have all of them set, you can run the R303, sorry, the R303. So this is going to show what honor rolls. I already ran this, so I'm going to pull this up here. Oop, wrong one. I want the other one. So you can see who it applies to. So I did this for, I did honor roll, merit roll, and all A's with, they're grouped by my GPA set. So my first 9 weeks GPA. So here is one group, here's Mickey, and then here is my 9th grade group. And that's Timber. So looking at the report, excuse me, I can do per grade level if I wanted to. If I leave everything to the left, it's going to pull everything in. I have my GPA sets, so I'm using the first 9 weeks GPA set. I don't have to pull all 3 of my honor roll sets. It's up to you. I just wanted them all on the same report. So it will pull all those. If you only want your all A list, you can pull that over. Make sure you're getting all your student statuses. So if you have active and your non-residents, should I do somewhere? You can pull both of those over. Everything else would stay to the left. If you want to include the student's middle name, I don't know why. So this is a unique one. So the newspaper format, I just learned this. So the newspaper format has the students' names and if what they made, what honor roll they made, A's, honor roll, merit roll, but it does not include student IDs, things like that. So it's, if you wanted to send it to the paper, has their name and what they made. And then you're going to group it by the GPA set. Okay, if you grouped it by student, it would be individual. And then you would sort it by student name and grade levels. So then when you run it, that would be the report that you would get. And I don't have a lot of students, but you would have multiple students and would have everything listed here. But this is a good report to look, so you can look at the groups at a glance and you can see what they've made. Again, we have more appendices. So Appendix A, well, actually there's just one, but it's just fairly long. It has all your troubleshooting. So if you are not seeing something, making sure that your honor roll is set up correctly, it is set up for the appropriate GPA set, and so forth. You know, I'm answering Rebecca and she's in the room, but you know what? I don't know if they don't print them anymore.
So for
Posting up.
sharing, I just asked the Zoom group, if does anybody use that newspaper format, or do they send their honor and merit roll to newspapers? Becky's answered back, but they won't print them for the daily record.
And I know we used to get the Trading Post, which I don't know if, I thought Wayne County had it too. I think it might be a Medina County thing. I know they used to print them in there, but I don't even think the Trading Post is around anymore. I mean, believe it or not, I do subscribe to the newspaper, but I get it digitally. Okay, multiple people are saying they just post theirs on their website, so it might still be useful, the newspaper format, if you're posting it, you know, just, yeah, exactly. Okay, any questions with creating those honor rolls? And again, I know some of you are newer, not everybody, but some of you are newer. So just double check them and make sure they're the way that you want. Maybe the district had it just set up honor roll, merit roll. Now you want to set it up per quarter. So, you know, make sure that's done prior to SYI, which would be January, February. Okay. Next, we are back and we will stay in the report card procedural checklist. We are only on page 4 of it. We'll get through it. Don't worry. This part goes fast. Okay. So the next part or the next thing that we are talking about, it says to update your comments. So in my go-to box, I am going to type in comment without an S, because I kept losing it while I was trying to figure this out. And I'm like, I don't know why it's not coming up, because there's no S on it. So it's comment, standard comment maintenance. So when a teacher is entering a report card, and I want to bring up a teacher here, hold on. Who is my teacher? Boring. Okay. So if I am a teacher and I am ready to enter report cards, this is what the teacher sees. And I know you guys don't see this side, so that's why what you do on your end is very important to what the teachers see on their end. So when a teacher is entering their marks, they pull their marks in. So they do check mark equals, it pulls marks in, which I don't think I have any marks for this class, but they also have comments. This is not set up correctly. Okay, bad example, because that's not set up correctly. So typically they have a drop down, and so it looks just like this, and it says, I can't even show you. It'll say 01, 002, 003. That's all they see. And then they would have to click on comment 1 or comment 2, and it populates a big long list. Well, you're the one that gets to control that list. So this is what they see in their grade books. So the code. 001, 002, and so forth. This is what will print on the report card. So again, I know it's simple little things, but for example, in this case, all the comments print in all capital letters. Do you want that? I mean, we're shouting out these comments. Well, do we want to shout out a comment that says low test scores and quiz scores? So, just things to look at, things to think about. Somebody else set this up. Now you get to maintain it. So if you don't want that, you can come in here, you can click on edit, and you can modify this. Okay. Or if you find a typo. Okay. There's things in here, for example, I don't remember what number it was, but one of them was uses flashcards. Okay, or needs to use flashcards. Do we use flashcards anymore? We're using our Chromebooks, so that one might need to be updated. So just different things like that, because I don't know how often these get updated. You just might want to look through them. I would probably talk with your building principal to make sure if you're completely changing something or if you're adding something. I know working with a lot of the teachers during beginning of the year training and so forth, they'll be like, well, I want a comment that says this. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can do that, but I don't know if your principal wants that comment. So just again, if you're adding, make sure that you have their approval, but you can also modify if you need to. Or if there's something in here that's completely, you don't need it, you can make it inactive. Okay, so it's just the code is what the teachers will see. The text is what gets printed on the report card, and it's just a general mark. Okay, so that goes in the comments area. And then if you need to make it inactive. Okay. So I don't have a handout for you or a procedural checklist, but if you come into the Learning Center, and type in the standard comment maintenance, which it is in the report card procedural checklist. So if you type that into the Learning Center, it will bring up the step-by-step on how to edit, modify, add. Okay. And I'm showing the two people in the classroom, and you guys can't see this on Zoom. But yes, so you can see it here that it brings up the step-by-step. Okay. Okay. Some reports. Now let's look at some reports. Some of these we're not going to go through, but some of them we will. So prior to printing, there are some things that you might want to look at. One is the R703. This is your class list. So I have not been through all of these. There are 13 different formats. I've just been told, so I do what I'm told. Class list format 1 and 4 are the ones that you should use. If anybody has used anything else, I would love to know why, so I can add that into my notes. I just know options 1 and 4 allow you to do grade verification, so you can double check things. So I'm going to leave it. It defaults to, mine defaults to format number 4. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to run this for GP1 because that's all I'm working with right now. My mark types, what I want to look at. I really wouldn't have a final for GP1, but if I want to bring that over, I could. If it was just a 9 weeks class, you might. Okay. If you wanted to do it for a specific teacher, or a specific course, you could do that as well. Your course types, your classes obviously are the ones that have the grades, but if you leave everything to the left, it will look at anything that has marks. So including like your satellite and CCP classes. Who do you want to run this for? It's pretty common that you run it for your active and your non-residents. You could break this down into groups and programs if you want, but we're just going to leave everything to the left. This is where you could put text coming up. It's going to sort by the student and then by the teacher. And I'm going to run this and I'm going to fake run it because I already ran it. This one, if you're running it for a large grade level and so forth, it might take a while. So you can see here, there's not a lot of marks or anything for most of my students because they don't have grades. So right now, if you ran this, if your district has not submitted grades yet, that nothing would be in there. I'm trying to find there. So there's Ben, he's got a grade in there. I can see any comments that the teacher left in there as well. I do have a few grades. There's Mickey's grade. So it's showing me GP1, his grade, and then a comment. So again, it's just a way to verify by teacher, here's boring, and any grades that were submitted. Okay, so that's the R703. The next two are looking for missing marks. So these can be helpful if you have that habitual teacher that always forgets to submit their grades. You're laughing because you know you have one of those. I'm sure every district has one. But we have the R302, the A and the B. So the A breaks it down. I don't think I did these. I did not because I don't have enough information in here because it populates everything. The A, so let's look at these, 302. The A is by student. So I can look by student to see if a student has missing marks. The B is by teacher. So I can see if a teacher has missing marks. And like I said, I only put in for one teacher, so it would populate a huge long list. But let's look at that. So I can look at completed marks, both or just missing. So this is a way to look at my missing marks for a student. Okay, so I can say, okay, I want to look in. I wouldn't do it for interims. I mean, I guess at interims I could. I wonder if Sherry set that up. No. Interims, I can look for just D's and F's. So those would be completed marks. But if I was looking for missing marks, I would do it by the 9 weeks. And then I could say, okay, yeah, I would do it by the 9 weeks and do a great period.
A hard time in interims because teachers forget and it doesn't show up if it's not there. So like I can pull up, so you could do.
Yes. So you would do the B. So let's go back. We would do the B in this case. So you would do the marks by teachers, missing mark. You would do your interim, which would be a grading period. No, it's the actual interim period. And then you would run it that way for your active and your non-resident. Yep. Yeah, I don't think you can specify. Oh, you can specify which teacher. But if you leave them all to the left, it'll pull them all. Yep. Okay, and then you can do this also. For this, you can do by grade level. So if you leave, because some teachers have multiple grade levels. If you just want to see all your 9th grade teachers that have not submitted, you can do it by grade level and then how you're going to sort it. Okay, and again, my list would be super long because only Mr. Boring has marks in there. So that's the difference between the A and the B. And then you do make sure that you would mark the missing. Okay, the next 3, oh, nope, I want to show the next one. Well, I'm skipping one. The marks analysis, the 301, I'm going to skip. The student composite. This is basically like a preview of the report cards from DASL. So Katie, your report cards are a little bit different, so this would not apply to you. So the composite is just going to show you like basically a little preview. Okay. So when I look at this, it says, okay, what do you want to run this for? I'm going to run it for first 9 weeks. with the first 9 weeks GPA set. And then I would hit run. So there's not really much I have to select unless I want to do it per grade level. If not, it's going to do all my grade levels. Okay. Once I hit submit, you can see here, I only have like a few students in here, but you can see here, here's the mini report card. So who my student is, their address, and then all their grades. And then it would show their GPA, their absences, and so forth. And then I would see all the kids. So I can kind of go through them quickly and go, oh, I noticed that I'm a teacher that their grades are missing for the student. So again, it's just another way to kind of verify that grades are not missing for the report card. That's the R111. The next three, I talked about those in the attendance tips class that I did last week, I think. They kind of all blur together last week, and we do have it posted. So we are going to start posting our videos in, student services. Yeah. Student services, and then our support videos. So I talk about some of these attendance reports halfway through here. So if you're interested in those reports from within, if you're just in the student information reports, they're going to pull days. They're not going to pull hours. You would have to go into the analytics hub, which is that last report, and it will show hours. So just be aware of that. So if I'm running like the R309, it's pulling hours where the analytics hub will pull, or I'm sorry, days where the analytics hub will pull hours, because it's set up to do HB 410. Okay, next, looking at student marks. We're gonna do it this way. So if I'm looking at student marks, I'm gonna put my student in context. Okay. This is going to show their schedule as well as any marks that they have. Okay, so SIS student marks. You can modify these grades. Okay, so if you're in here, you can modify them. If I come into one of them, it's going to say, okay, what grading period should the mark be? Okay, and then I can say apply and view, and it's going to show me and allow me to put these in. Here is a huge tip. Now, I know there's cases, somebody got sick, maybe, they're out for a week or two, and you need to put a grade in. This does not match what is in the teacher's grade book. So if I say, okay, this student didn't get an A-, they got a B. If the grade book gets recalculated, this will populate in grade book, but as soon as the grade book gets recalculated, it'll go back to the A-. So then if we ever go back in the archive or you print a report card again, it's going to get updated to the A-. So if grades need to be changed, I would make notes to say, okay, Mr. Boring, I changed your section 2 for Mickey Mouse. Like you asked, I changed it to a B. You need to update your grade book. Because if not, it's just going to be a constant back and forth. It does not stick. Yes.
They could do that, be unbeknownst to you.
Right. Well, the district can also recalculate too. Yeah. 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 Every time they do the check mark equals, it recalculates. So yes, so just be aware of that. But like I said, sometimes there's a case that you need to put these in. Now, that's per student. So I am in SIS student marks, the student mark entry. So this is just for Mickey Mouse. Now there are times, okay, There are times that you are going to need to put in marks for a teacher, such as a CCP class, because some of our kids that are doing CCP, you just get a final grade and you're putting it in because the teacher's not in your district. Bless you. So in that case, I'm going to go into the teacher menu and I'm going to go to this course section mark and I can't speak. Course section mark entry. So with that being said, I would find my teacher. I would pick the course. So it's going to be, if in the case of a CCP class, it would be a final. Okay. So I'm going to do a final and I'm going to apply the marks. And notice now it says final instead of GP1. So then I could put A, B, C, D, whatever the university gave me for them. These are, if I have comments, you're probably not putting in a comment for a college class, but you would put in the 001, 002, those codes. Okay, but this is commonly used for CCP classes. And because that teacher is not in your district or they're not in the gradebook system. So you are manually putting those in. And that is, if you're following along, that is the bottom of page 6. So that is a good one to mark. Okay. Now, we have everything in place. Okay. So before we actually run the report card, there are 2 more or 3 more reports I want to share with you that are not listed in here that you can check course information. So if you just want to make sure, double check everything is set, it's included in the GPA, well, whatever it might be. So one, it's called the CRSE report. What that stands for, I guess it's course, the course report, maybe. Yeah, if you just type in CRSE, it populates. So it's course curriculum. So you can look at this by course type. So I'm just looking at my classes. If you wanted to pull over your satellite CCP classes, you can do that as well. You can look at it per grade level. So in this case, I'm just going to look at my 12th grade classes, or you can just, it will pull all the grades from the building. You can look specific subject area if you want. If any of the classes have a difficulty level, so maybe you're looking at your CCP classes to see how they're set up, you can pull in that difficulty level. This is the important area for the CRSE. The fields to display. What do you want to look at? Okay, you can have up to 10 fields in this report. You get to pick what you see. So you can see here, I can see credits, how many credits it's worth, if it's an honors course, if there's a level of difficulty selected for that course. Hey, guess what? Include in GPA. So you can see if that course was checked for that and the print on report card was checked. Sometimes things get overlooked. And then Algebra 1's not showing on the report card because it was never checked when the course was set up. But you have all these different types of things that you can include in there. Some of them, I don't know why you would actually want to see those in a report, but they give you those options. Again, you can have up to 10 of those. So then I'm going to submit that. Go into my management screen. This one should go quick. So it is a long list. Okay, so you can see it has all my course codes, my course name, what grade levels it applies to. So for example, you're like, why is English 12 not printing? Well, maybe you forgot to include 12th grade. How many credits it's worth. Now these are the fields that I said I wanted to include. Yep. So these are the credits, or these are the columns that I said include. So those are those fields to display. So I said how many credits it was worth, if it's an honors class, if it is having the difficulty level, the level of difficulty, print on the report card and include in GPA. If you see a flag for the end for include in GPA, you want to make sure you get that fixed. Okay, so this is per course. This you cannot filter, do anything with. It's a PDF, so it's just something to look at. You can print, highlight, whatever. The other one that I'm going to show you is in the Analytics Hub. So this is called the course detail. I have mine starred, but it is under scheduling. It is called course detail. The difference between the report versus an Analytics Hub report is the Analytics Hub allows you to be able to export. So if I look at my course details, okay, so it's for the 24-25 school year, and I'm going to do this for the high school only. So this is a very wide report. Okay, these are all the different column headings that can apply to a course. So you're not going to want to sit there and try to look at this on the screen. I can filter out some of these things, but it's hard because the column headings don't match up. So for example, 1, 2, 3, or I'm sorry, A, B, C, D. We'll say we don't want the abbreviation A, B, C, D. If I uncheck D, it hides that column. But by the time you get way over to here, you're going to forget what letter you're on. So it's easier to export this. So if I say export to Excel, ignore that one, you can see it brings it up. So then I can start filtering, enable my editing. Oh, just switch screens on me. So I can enable my editing and then click in the row that I want to filter. So I'm going to click on my filter. And then I want to say, okay, let's see which ones are not for high school credit. So I want to say, okay, is no for high school credit. So then it's going to pull up these and you're like, okay, yep, that's correct. My coaches classes shouldn't have it. My admin classes and lunch should not have it. But
Yourself in case you missed one earlier.
But again, you're like looking at it, the screen is way too wide. So now you can filter stuff. So that's what the Analytic Hub allows you to export. The other one that I like, it doesn't necessarily, this is good for the beginning of the year. It doesn't always show you all of those details. It shows you the course, but I like it and I just want to share with you because I do use it. The R807. So you can do this by grade level, by course. If you just leave everything to the left, it's going to pull everything over. But what it does is it shows your courses, and then it also shows the amount of students that are enrolled in that course. I'll just pull up the one that I already ran instead of waiting for it. So you can see course ID, the course name, what term it is for. It does not show you, is in GPA or print on report card, but it does show you the capacity. So how many students are enrolled in that class. So you can see, okay, you know what, my Spanish class has 20 kids in there. So just a way to make sure, okay, I need to make sure that that class is printing on the report card because there's 20 kids. You might want to just pull your CCP classes and you can see how many kids are enrolled in those CCP classes. So again, it doesn't show you all the details of those other two, but it is helpful when you're looking to make sure that you're printing things for those students that are enrolled. Okay, printing the report cards. How many, and those of you, those of you online, if you can just stick it in the chat, how many of you guys are physically sending home paper copies of the report card still? Okay, so in the room, we have 1 out of 2. I know some schools are getting away from it, so. Okay. So good. Chris is saying that she only sends them home if they request a hard copy. Okay, and remember that is on the student's profile on that additional tab. So let's go back and look at that. We only send ours at your end. You know what? I'm noticing a lot of people do that now too, is just send them home one time. We're going to look at Mickey real quick. So if I look at Mickey on his profile, so if I go to his additional tab, requires a paper copy would need to be checked. So in Chris's case, if that's checked for the students, when she prints, there's an option for that, and it would only print those students that have that checked on the profile tab. Okay, so the R700. And I'm going to state this now, Katie. I know some of this hasn't applied to you since you're elementary. I'm going to point this out right now, just in case you jump off, but on the student information homepage, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. There is something called finalizing report cards for parent access that has both elementary report cards like you would print out of GradeBook, and it also has the R700 that we're talking about now. So I will show you some of that in a little bit. The R700 won't apply to you directly, but the information for parent access and so forth that I'm going to talk about will. Okay. Okay, so sorry, back to the R700. So we're going to go through everything on here, kind of go through, make sure it's set up correctly. My thought is the person before you, or in some cases it was you, there are probably load settings created. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is look at the load settings before you start selecting any of your criteria. So when you look at the load settings, you're going to want to see when it was created and for what grading period it was created for. Okay. So for example, if I didn't have anything that I created, I could say, okay, well, I want to use the first 9 weeks from last year, but I'll just update it to this year. You can do that. Okay. Also, you might notice that there's a ton in here. You might see a bunch of them. If you need them removed, just put in a help ticket and I can get some of those removed. Because sometimes they date back to like 2012, 2010, but we can get those deleted for you. Okay. So in this case, if I don't have anything created for this year, I want to create and modify what was created last year. I'm going to click on last year's. We'll pretend these are not here. Okay. So I'm going to click on the 23-24 first 9 weeks. The reason why I say look at the load settings first, because it's going to pull the report that you use for printing report cards. Okay. So I do have a mistake that I want you guys to see. So we know that you are not changing the selection criteria if your report card has a rhinoceros on it. So if you ever see a rhinoceros in the student's profile, that means the wrong report card format was selected or one was not selected at all. That is just the default. So it is on there, so we know that it's incorrect. And you can see things are getting cut off. It's just kind of like jammed in here. It's on 2 pages. So that is not correct. And that would be when I just come in here. I don't go to any of my load settings. I just come in here and I leave the report card layout alone. So that's why I said, depending on your school or who was there before you, you might want to click on their load setting to see what template was used or what layout was used. Most of our districts have custom ones made. So you can see here, we put their initials, the school initials after it. Some have middle school and high school because they have different formats. You will see there the N3s and the N4s. These are common ones that people use. The L is landscape, so it's the long way. If you like this, but it's missing something, maybe you need something extra, you would put in a ticket, let us know, and then we would modify it and make you a custom one. So then instead of going to the N3L, you would go to the one that was TCCSA Baltic. Okay. So you can see all of them in here. There's a lot in here, and then we can modify any of them for you. So in this case, I'm going to use this layout. Typically, you do not have to change any of these things. So based on the layout that is being used, it will pick whether it's landscape or not. If you change it and you're like, well, I don't want landscape anymore, I want it portrait, the layout is set for that orientation. So just be aware of that. Now with the printers and stuff, we typically don't have to worry about any of the paper sizes. It has the margins. It will print as needed. So most of that is done. I always pick the school year. It says in the notes that this is not necessarily needed, but I've always picked it. I don't know. You can tell me otherwise, but I always just put the current school year in there so that it just pulls that information. We are not printing interims. Does anybody still physically print interims, or they just have them for parent access? You still physically print interims. Okay. So you would go through this at interim time, but you would make sure it says yes. If you are a district, and I'm going to call out Lauren because I think you guys used to, I don't know if you still do. You guys used to just get the interims and post them to parent access. You never physically printed them. I don't know if you guys are still doing that or not, if you're just going by the grades in parent access, or if you still want that digital copy of the interim. But that would be the only time if you're actually physically wanting the interim card. So it looks like the report card at interim time. So next we're going to go through kind of all of these. I'm going to kind of summarize pages 11 through, let me keep going, 11 through 17. So 11 through 17 has all of these things in here with descriptions. I'm not going to sit here and read through them. I'm going to kind of tell you what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Okay. So my reporting terms. So, my reporting terms to show comments. So you can only have one. So you can't show for multiple grading periods. So whatever grading period you are running the report cards, that's what reporting term you should pull comments for. Okay. And again, those are those comments that you might update that we looked at earlier. The mark type for which to show comments, this is not needed. You don't have to put anything over on the left-hand side. If you do, the only thing you would put would be grading period, but you can leave it blank. You can leave everything over at the left. This is a huge one. So if you have not ran report cards before, please put a star by this one. Okay. When you run this, no matter if it's first 9 weeks, no matter if it's fourth 9 weeks, you want everything over on the right, except for your interims, unless you're running interims. But the reason being is if you only put GP1 is going to be a huge wide column and it's going to look very funny. Whereas if you pull over the reporting terms, it'll say GP1, show the grades, GP2 be blank, GP3 be blank, and so forth. So it looks like a normal report card. I think I printed it or pulled up examples. Give me 1 second. So you can see GP 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it looks and it shows everything, but it shows blank. And then if I went, oh, where did my screen go? Thought I did one. That was wrong. Yes. So if I only selected GP1, it looks weird. Okay, so typically we put all of our reporting periods. If you have exams, if you have averages, you would include those as well. So it just looks like a consistent report card from first 9 weeks all the way through fourth 9 weeks. Okay. So again, this is the reporting terms for which to show marks. You would include everything that you report. Mark types for which to show marks. You can leave that blank. It'll pull over the grades, but if not, you can pull in your grading periods. So that's going to show your grading period marks. If you leave everything to the left, it knows that it'll pull everything. Same with your course types. Your lunches, study halls, those aren't going to have grades. So there's not going to be anything there for it to print. And plus, typically when those courses are set up, it's not checked to print on report card. So you can leave everything to the left or you can bring over class. This is always going to be all. So you're going to leave it as all. And the first one is going to be yes. So the show the required marks only. If there is some case where you want, and that is listed here, if you want course history marks to show, so if you're manually putting marks in course history and you want that to print on the report card, remember this is a report card, not a transcript, you would put no. But very rarely do you ever want that to happen. Okay, so again, this is different than a transcript. Your transcript will print that course history, but your report card, you typically don't want that, so you leave that as yes. Print report cards if student has no marks or comments. Typically that is no. Why would you want to print a blank report card? So like in my case, that since everybody's blank except for a couple kids, I would have a lot of blank papers. Okay. Most of these are, you're going to leave as no. There's a few maybes that you could pick. So this is print courses from a previous or prior course term that has no marks. So do you want to print stuff from last year? Probably not. Do you want to print courses from a current year that has no marks? Okay, so I don't know what that would be. Maybe if they're taking Algebra 1 and the Algebra 1 teacher never put in a grade. It will print that without the mark. Some people choose this for yes. Print the future course term that has no marks. So if I'm future enrolled in a class, so I'm taking something second semester, it will print the course on the report card with no mark. If you say yes. This we typically leave no, the course history with no marks. We're going to leave that as no. Your dropped courses for the past or current course term in the current year, typically yes. So if I'm taking my Algebra 1 and I dropped it during second 9 weeks, I do want that to show up on the report card for first 9 weeks and show that it was dropped. So that's during the current school year. and then these you wouldn't really use. It would be the same thing for future courses, and this would be for prior years. So typically those are no. The only other one that you might use is show the rows from different schools. So you might have a student from it's a bad example, but a CCP class that maybe they're teaching, it's not your class, it's from the other school. It's within the same year, you would want that to print on there. Typically, it's taught by a teacher within your district most of the time, and it prints directly with their schedule within the current school. That's used rarely. Down here, are these no? Required is flagged to be true. These are both left at no as well. Okay. So if you're looking at our GPA sets, okay, right now, oh,
Sorry,
yep,
have a line equivalent marks, but our thing says stretch marks, which is not good.
I believe stretch marks is this. I've always left it on the top one.
My stretch marks don't look like
Did you print stretch marks?
that. No.
Oh. Fill the width of the mark shape within. I always have just, and this is how I printed all of them with the top one selected. So I wonder if I don't know. That's a great question. Seeing if it gives a more of a definition. I'm not seeing it. Oh, okay. It's optional.
So it's more just have.
Which will keep equivalent mark columns aligned. So it's the full width of the page. Stretch marks to fill width of marks shape, which will use the full width of the available marks subreport, regardless of how many marks are in the marking pattern. Instead, each take up the full width without their columns being aligned together. I think the first one, they're all even, all the columns are even. I think this one, it varies based on the letter that it is. So like if it's an A+ versus something else. That's what it sounds like to me. But like I said, when I ran all my reports, I keep it on a line. Okay. Good question, because I didn't really change that at all. I just ran it with it as is. Okay, so here's where our GPA set is. And again, and here's our honor roll GPA set. Those are those names. So make sure they're named properly. This is also if you do the honor roll for each 9 weeks and the GPA set for each 9 weeks, you can just pull it over individually. If you're running the report card and you don't do the honor roll set for each 9 weeks, you have to make sure it's updated in the honor roll maintenance screen before you can run the report card. So again, that's why I did suggest when we were going through the honor roll that you create one for each of the 9 weeks. This will always be no. So always make sure it's no here. I don't know exactly how long it takes, but everybody says it takes forever to run report cards if you say yes. If you do need to rerun your GPA set, go to GPA set, click on that refresh button, and that will reset it real quick. So I don't know what the difference is, but I've just always been said, everybody says, don't do it here. Okay. Terms to show attendance for. We are in grading period number 1. So that's all we're going to show attendance for. If we were running this for 4th 9 weeks, we would have GP 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way. So it would have all of those. So then it shows, you know, first 9 weeks absence, second, and so forth. If you want to break down the absence types to show, but typically we leave everything over on the side so it shows all of the absences. The period attendance, we don't use period attendance within student information. Teachers use that within GradeBook. It's all mixed in there. Student status, you probably want to run these just for your active and your non-residents. So you would pull those over. My little Google Translate keeps getting in the way today. Okay. If you want to print per program, so I know, Georgia, your career center, if you just wanted to pull for a specific program, you could, it allows you to, or if you wanted to do by grade level, you can do that as well. And then you can see, you can pull by counselor. If you wanted to print only a certain counselor, maybe one counselor has A through F and the other counselor has G through Z. I had to think about that one. And any of your membership groups. You can do an ad hoc membership here. You know, if you have an ad hoc membership for a school year or for a grade level, you don't necessarily have to apply the ad hoc membership because you can print per grade level down at the bottom. So just be aware of that, but it is an option to be able to print for a specific ad hoc group. Now, in my case, I am going to print for a specific student. This is where you would put in a student ID if you need to test one student or look at one student's report card, you would put in their student ID here. If you were going for a full grade level, you would just leave it completely blank. This one, and I know I went backwards, but this one is print the called name for their first name. So for example, we all have them in our schools. We have Michael John Smith, and he goes by Jack. You're like, how in the world does he go by Jack? But that's what he goes by. If you check that, it's going to print Jack Smith on the report card versus Michael Smith. So that's what that does. Elementary report cards also have that when you are printing them. It is actually in the report card setup. So if that is something you want, talk with your building principal. I can turn that on for those elementary report card. But again, it's in the setup screen. I can set that up for you. This is common text for all the report cards. So notice this says, welcome to the 23-24 school year. You could put something like reminders for parent teacher conferences, anything like that, but this goes on all of the report cards. The grading scale will only populate if the format that you picked allows for the grading scale. I don't know what buildings print this. I don't know what buildings don't print this. Or what formats have this. So just be aware of that when you're printing. It's based on the layout of the report card, not based on what you type in here. This print blank report cards for unpaid fees. If you say yes, it'll print their name and demographic information, but it will have no grades. So that's an option. However, if they still have access to parent access, doesn't matter if you give them a blank report card, they can still see their grades. And then this is the print students requesting those hard copies. So again, that's from that profile page. So if it's checked on their profile, if I check this, for example, I know Chris said she does this, so she would have to check it and it only prints those kids. So if there's only 5 kids in the school, it's only going to print those 5 kids. This section, you're not going to fill out anything. You're going to leave it blank. Sherry, I'll talk to you later because I know we set up some eligibility things for, but I think that was a different report. It was for report cards for those specific kids. So this is kind of a nice feature, and I guess I've overlooked it for many, many years. So as you read things more in detail and you pay attention a little bit more, this separates your report cards by grades. So if you're printing them all at once, it will make sure that you are separated by grade levels. If it is checked, but then that means your sorting option here needs to be sorted by grade first. Then it could be student name. Okay, so just be aware of that. If you check that here, it's sorting down here should be grade level. And then you can pick what grade you want to print. So if I'm at the high school, I can do one at a time, or I can say, hey, just print all 4 because I checked that off. Couple tips if you are printing a student IDs. I'm just printing for Mickey Mouse today, but if you are printing a student ID, well, I'm going to put another one. I'll put in, you separate them by a comma, but you can only have up to 50. So it doesn't allow you to have any more than 50. So if you do have more than 50, you would have to create an ad hoc group for if it was not a complete grade level. I skipped something. Oh, right here. I was going to say, I didn't think I got to that part yet. So this is your include copied on correspondence. So this is if it's shared parenting and both parents need that report card. If I mark yes, it's going to go to the contacts of all the students that you're printing for. Anybody that says copied on correspondence, it is going to print that report card or an extra report card for them. So I'm going to show you that real quick so you can see that. So if I'm in Mickey Mouse, I have him in context. If I go to view contacts, if my contact, my secondary contact, maybe parents are separated, if copied with correspondence is checked for this contact, when I check that box, it will print an additional report card with this contact's information. Okay, now, again, I am still using last year's. Okay, I pulled over the 24-25. And let me get my student in context here. Now he's got such a hard student ID. Okay, before we print, before we hit submit, so we have everything set up for our first 9 weeks. Okay, we want to create our own load settings. Okay, so I have this set up. It's set up for the first 9 weeks. It's ready to go. So before I click submit, I am going to click on load settings. Once I click on load settings, it comes here. I don't want to click on anything but give it a name. (24-25) first quarter. If you have multiple people in your office, you probably want to leave this unchecked for private so other people can pull it and use it so they can print the report card just like you do. Once I hit save, you're going to see it populates it in my list. Okay. This is the important part, and I know several of you had questions about parent access. So this is the last thing that I need to do in order for it to populate in parent access. I am now going to click on my pencil. So now that I have it saved, I click on my pencil. Once I click on my pencil, it's going to show the name. If it was private or not, you can change it here as well. But this is the important part. It should just say post to parent access, but it's called schedule the report card. So in GradeBook, it is called, it is finalize, and then it might say schedule as well. But they just stated a little bit different. So, but it is finalizing those report cards for parent access. So once I check that, it's going to ask me what term. So I'm going to do first 9 weeks. It is automatically going to look at the day of the last day of the 9 weeks. So the last day of my 9 weeks on my calendar is the 25th. So if I want these printed at a later date or an earlier date, I can change the date here. But it will always default to that day. And then once I hit save, you will see that it is now scheduled. So you can see under status, it now says pending. So then I know that it hasn't ran yet. So if I click back on my pencil, I can see my status is pending because it's waiting for that date to pass. If I changed it to today, which I'm going to do, hold on. Let me go back to my load settings because I want to show you guys. I did this on purpose. The 8th. Okay. I'm going to process this yesterday. I'm going to hit save. It hasn't ran yet. Even though I put yesterday's date, I need to say run. So once I say run ready jobs, it'll run. I'll let it go for a second. It will run, but as soon as it runs, then that's when it posts to parent access. Okay. So if I'm ready to print now, so I'm physically printing, so I have it set up to schedule, whether it's scheduled for today or a different day, it's all saved. I could go back into my load settings by clicking on the link under the name. Everything is set up, and then I could submit to print. So typically we do pick up. You're not going to have it emailed to you. We do pick up, it puts it into your management screen. So it's been run. I look at my management screen. You can also see on your management screen, it is now completed. So that run ready jobs that I did, it just ran about a minute ago and it completed. So when I looked at it the first time, it was still yellow because it wasn't complete yet. It will show you in here that the report card was published to parent access. Refresh, it should be done. And then here are my report cards. And I printed them for those two. Okay. Of course, you would probably print it for the whole entire grade level versus just those two. Okay, so a few things that I want to show you. So we have it here. What did it do for us when we schedule it? Couple things. If I look at my student in context, so I have Mickey Mouse. If I click on my I want to, I can now say view the latest report card. When I do that, it's going to populate here. This also works at the elementary level. So if you are finalizing your report cards at the elementary level, you can see the report card in student information because you typically work in student information more than you do GradeBook. You're only in GradeBook to print those report cards. So as long as you click that finalize, then you will be able to view the report cards here.
But on students requesting a hard copy, it didn't say.
So were you modifying it? Were you modifying an already created load setting? I think you have to, let me double check this. So here's my first quarter. I think you have to resave it.
Resave the load setting.
Hmm. I'm pretty sure it does not override. So where was that? The copy. Was it the copy correspondent or the hard copy? Here's was the hard copy. Which I know I've passed it like 10 times. Written name, it's here, right there. Okay, so now if I go to my load settings, I have to give it a new name and save, because if I just hit save, yeah. So I would give it a new name and then delete the old. You can delete your old, you're allowed to delete your own that you create, you just can't delete somebody else's. I'm talking to the screen again.
I love it. It's fun to watch you. It's fun.
Well, I'm reading too, because she's answering. So they're all laughing at me here. So then once I would save the new one, then I would delete this one. So good question. Okay, so just a few more things. I know we're running out of time. So I do want to show you, and there's Katie and Sherry. You guys are the only two that don't have access to do this. Everybody else does. So in GradeBook, if you guys ever want to see what this looks like. So from the principal page, or from the guidance page, you can access this. You and Katie have clerical and I think attendance. I don't think attendance has it. I didn't look at that one, but no, it does not. So guidance and principal have this. So whichever one, if you go into GradeBook, so if you're in student information, you can click on GradeBook. My suggestion is to hit Control and click on GradeBook so it opens in a new tab versus opening in the tab that you're working in. So once I'm on my principals page, I have view progress via parent access. From guidance, it's over here on the side. So either one's going to take me to the same place. I would type in a student's name, so I know I printed mouse, hit search. I can click on Mickey to view his information, and I get to see what their parent access looks like. Teachers have this option from within their gradebook. And then, like I said, from the principal's page or the guidance page, you can see this. So Katie and Sherry, if this is something that you guys would be interested in, you would need to talk to your PB point person to change your access, or it could be your EMIS person to give you access for guidance so you guys could see this. It's just a job function. So over here on the side, I have report cards. Okay. So, and we finalize them. We scheduled them. So if I say view my report card, it's going to populate the PDF. So now the parent has the hard copy. They can print however they want. Okay. My other thing that a parent is going to see is this paper history. So if I click on the paper history, you can see, and I did this on purpose because I wanted you guys to see how changing the name changed everything for me. So if I look here, I have GP1, GP1. So I ran it earlier this morning and I called it first quarter 24-25. So I ran that. Here's this report card. We need to rerun because there was a mistake or somebody didn't put it in a grade. So we're rerunning our report card. And we're going to talk about the archive here in a second. I can rerun with the same exact name. And notice it calls it description here, but this is your load setting name. If I have the same exact name, it will overwrite. It has to be the same name and the same date. If anything is different, it's going to populate it a second time. Okay. You probably don't want that. No, because they're going to be like GP1, what is that? So, or if you totally made a mistake and you're like, I don't want that at all, we can actually delete the run. So if I am back in my student information, no, not in that one. I'm going to go in my go-to and I'm going to type in archive. There's this archived report card maintenance. So there's two things you can do here. You can delete a run if you did it wrong and you want to redo it. You can completely delete it. So it deletes it from the vault, which means it deletes it from the I want to menu, deletes it from parent access. Okay. Oh, I have a student in context. I'm like, why can't I edit this? There. Sorry, I had it. Let me go back. Let me go back. I had a student in context. So when I clicked on it, it didn't let me edit. And last time it didn't. I can rewind the video and show you guys. But once I took the student out of context, then it allows me to edit. So if I notice, like maybe I didn't capitalize the Q and I think it looks weird, I could rename this and give it a new name because this is what I'm going to see in parent access. So for example, Chris had the comment, her load settings weren't correct that first run. And then she has to resave it. So she can rename the first one like old or whatever. And then, she can delete it, or you can come here and you can rename the run if you had it named something like third run or fourth run or something like that, because some people do, they keep running it and they'll say second try or third try. So you can come here and rename it. Parents see this. Correct. Well, you don't want to delete. If you delete the entire run, the entire archive, it removes it from parent access.
But that's what she's saying, like maybe you don't want to.
Yes, if you don't want them to see it at all, you take it out and then you can rerun and reschedule it. You can rename it, yes. So maybe you noticed every quarter, first quarter, second quarter, you said first quarter 24-25, second quarter 24-25, third quarter you put in 24-25, third quarter, and you're like, oh, I want consistency. You can just come here and rename it without having to rerun. Okay. Okay. Last thing is disabling the report cards for parent access for students with unpaid fees. I showed you in the R700 how you can say print a blank report card, but they still see their grades in parent access. And if you publish a report card, it still populates in parent access. If you go into, this one's in district administration, district options, have to be at the district level. And some of you might not have access to this, but I can come all the way down here and say disable report cards on parent access for students with unpaid fees. So they cannot see any report cards. Okay. And again, I don't know who has access to that and who doesn't, but that is just a setting that is available. Okay. And I would say, I think almost everybody now during gradebook cleanup, we talk about it. It has to be turned on for parents to be able to see report cards, but I think every district now has it turned on. So as long as you're finalizing, they automatically get published there. So I'm going to jump into the gradebook side for a second for Katie. So yours is a little bit different when you're running yours, because you're running yours from the gradebook screen. So when you run yours, you would run it preliminary first. Okay, so for whichever report card that you're running, you would run through it. Here is what yours is big as the R700. Okay, you would pick your 9 weeks, what comments you would pick for GP1. If you're doing a grade level or if you're doing an individual student, you would search here. Okay. And then you would submit that. That's just a prelim run to make sure it looks okay. So that's kind of similar to that one report that we ran. What was that? The 112 that showed them kind of that preview of what the report card was going to look like. This is kind of the same thing for you. Then when everything looks great, you will come here to final and then submit the same way. And I have one started. So then it comes in here and it gets to the point where it processes the PDF. So you can click here to see the PDF. It's not published to parent access yet until you click on finalize. Once you click on finalize, this is those same settings that were in the load settings for the R700. You would pick what grading period and then when it's going to be available. So that's when it will process or schedule it. And then you would click OK and would go through that process. Okay. And then the same thing, it would show up on parent access. So yours just looks a little bit different because it's in GradeBook versus the SIS side with all of those different choices. You don't have as many. Any last minute questions? And again, from here, for all of you that are new to this, please, please, please look at this finalizing report cards for parent access. Yes, the report card procedural checklist is great, but this gives you nice little screenshots. So we kind of simplified it in a PowerPoint for you. Oh, transferring grades to a homeschool. That's a completely different class. Yes. That is, I was trying to think when I'm doing that. I believe it is November. November 20th. We'll go over all that information. Yeah, that's a whole separate class. Sorry, I think when I saw it earlier, I thought you meant like putting the grades on parent access. Anything else